The sound of sirens sliced through the quiet streets of Fort Worth as federal agents in dark suits fanned out around a small church. Office building tucked between a laundromat and a corner diner. Inside, William Neal "Doc" Gallagher. The preacher, known for decades as the Money Doctor, was sitting calmly at his mahogany desk, a lukewarm cup of coffee in his hand. Unaware that every move he had made for the past 20 years was about to unravel in minutes. Drawers flew open, doors banged against walls, and the smell of stale coffee mixed with the tension of agents sweeping through every room. A heavy safe, hidden behind a framed painting of the Last Supper, clicked open and, inside, nothing. Empty space. Gallagher's smirk faltered for the first time in years. He realized in a single heartbeat that his empire of promises, of pious smiles, and fraudulent assurances had come crashing down. Before I dive further, let me ask you, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you love jaw-dropping, unbelievable scam stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to Scamsphere so you never miss another story of greed, faith, and betrayal. Gallagher's empire had been built carefully, almost elegantly, in the quiet of Texas radio waves and the sanctity of Sunday church pews. He was not a man of flashy cars or ostentatious wealth, at least not openly. He preferred the subtle charm of the trustworthy preacher, white-haired, soft-spoken man with an easy smile and a measured voice. He had mastered the art of blending faith with finance. "God has chosen me to guide your money," he would say on air, as listeners leaned forward in their living rooms, nodding, hearts full of trust. With him, your retirement is secure. Without him, you risk ruin. The Money Doctor's pitch was simple but effective. He promised returns far higher than banks offered, guaranteed steady growth, and wrapped it in biblical language. "Lay your money at the feet of God," he preached during his radio sermons, "and it shall be multiplied in his grace." And like magic, thousands of devout believers entrusted him with their life savings, convinced that their shepherd would lead them to prosperity. In reality, Gallagher was a master manipulator, orchestrating a Ponzi-like system where new investments funded the returns of earlier clients. A carefully constructed illusion of legitimacy. Among the victims were James and Carol Herman, a retired couple who had faithfully followed Gallagher's advice for years. They poured nearly all of their savings into his program, over $700,000. At first, they received monthly dividend checks in amounts that seemed modest but consistent, and they were thrilled. "It felt like a blessing," Carol recalled, "like God himself had sent someone to watch over our retirement." But as time went on, the payments stopped growing. The couple requested larger withdrawals after medical expenses and a minor accident, and the numbers became inconsistent. It was not just the Hermans. Over time, dozens of elderly investors, churchgoers, and retirees began noticing discrepancies. Some had asked for withdrawals they never received. Others realized that deposits they had faithfully sent had vanished without explanation. One woman's grandson noticed that her annuity had been surrendered without authorization. Investigators eventually traced the path of the funds and recognized the pattern. Gallagher was using new investments to pay old investors while secretly siphoning off millions for personal use. Cars, homes, vacations, and luxury dinners were being funded by those who had trusted him implicitly, their faith weaponized against them. Federal agents and state investigators coordinated with surgical precision. They discovered the stash house, a hidden location where Gallagher was rumored to keep physical assets. When agents entered the property, they were met with layers of locks, an aura of meticulous secrecy, and empty shelves. The safe, a symbol of his alleged wealth, contained nothing but empty air. It was a powerful metaphor for his operation promises of abundance. Faith-driven assurances, but ultimately, nothing tangible existed. Gallagher had spent decades perfecting his public persona. He hosted seminars in churches, offering free pastries and coffee, while preaching the virtues of faith-guided financial stewardship. He handed out pamphlets, quoting Bible verses alongside charts showing safe returns. He was a media-savvy pastor who understood that fear, hope, and religious devotion were powerful motivators. "Trust in God, trust in me, and your money will be multiplied," he said on one broadcast. The lines between spiritual guidance and financial manipulation blurred until there was no distinction. The evidence uncovered by investigators revealed staggering numbers. Gallagher had raised nearly $29 million from around 60 elderly investors. Yet, when authorities froze his accounts, they found just over $800,000 remaining, a fraction of what was promised. The missing funds had been spent on luxury cars, personal vacations, home renovations, and other indulgences masquerading as business expenses. Receivers pieced together how Gallagher moved money from account to account, ensuring old investors continued receiving returns long enough to maintain trust while siphoning off profits that would never see the light of day. As the investigation deepened, former clients came forward to testify about the emotional toll. Tears were common. The humiliation of being duped by a pastor, the betrayal of faith and trust, was nearly as painful as the financial loss itself. Many families had to downsize, sell homes, or borrow from relatives to cover living expenses that had been secured by Gallagher's fraudulent schemes. One widow, who had invested her late husband's pension, admitted she now feared she would run out of money before the end of her life. Another elderly retiree expressed a chilling loss of faith. "I do not trust anybody anymore, except my family and God, but after what Gallagher did, even that trust feels fragile." The trial was a media sensation in Texas. Prosecutors detailed every manipulation, every lie, every tactic used to exploit the devout. Gallagher's courtroom demeanor was calm, almost charming, but it could not mask the gravity of his crimes. Victims took the stand, recounting not just the numbers stolen, but the psychological impact, the fear, betrayal, and loss of community trust. Each testimony painted a picture of a man who weaponized his religious authority to amass a fortune at the expense of the vulnerable. In the end, justice moved forward. Gallagher was convicted of multiple counts, including fraud, money laundering, and theft. He received multiple concurrent life sentences, along with orders for restitution to the victims, though the amount recovered could only partially compensate for the devastation caused. Investigators managed to seize a few remaining assets: cars, the home he had lived in, and the skeletal remains of the company he had built on deception. The scandal sent shockwaves through Christian communities across Texas, prompting discussions about accountability, transparency, and the dark side of religious influence in financial matters. Even after the conviction, Gallagher's story remains a stark reminder. Trust, when exploited, can be weaponized, and the intersection of faith and finance can be fertile ground for crime. The victim's resilience and the tireless efforts of investigators ensured that the fraud came to light. But the scars left behind, both financial and emotional, remain. And if you thought this story was intense, this is only the beginning. The next chapter will reveal the inner workings of Gallagher's empire, the meticulous ways he manipulated investors, and the shocking scale of his deception. It will take you deep inside a world where faith, greed, and cunning intersected in ways you cannot imagine. Stay tuned, because the true scope of the crime and the reactions of the victims are even more chilling than the raid itself. The courtroom in Fort Worth was packed. Elderly victims, journalists, and a mix of curious onlookers filled the wooden benches, their eyes fixed on William Neal "Doc" Gallagher, who sat stoically, his once smiling face now a mask of tension. Outside, reporters shouted questions, cameras clicked, and a heavy sense of anticipation hung in the air. The man who had once preached salvation and prosperity from the pulpit was now facing the full weight of justice. The evidence was damning, the testimonies gut-wrenching, and yet Gallagher maintained a veneer of calm, almost as if he were still delivering one of his charismatic sermons. By the time the trial commenced, investigators had pieced together the full extent of the scam. Nearly $29 million had flowed from unsuspecting retirees into Gallagher's coffers over several years. Every dollar was accounted for in paper trails and bank transfers. But the reality was stark. Almost none of the money had been invested legitimately. The majority had been used to pay earlier investors, while the rest funded Gallagher's comfortable lifestyle. The elegant suburban home, the luxury cars, and even lavish dinners were all purchased with stolen savings from those who trusted him implicitly. The prosecution laid it all bare, with precision, tracing account by account, deposit by deposit, exposing the intricate web Gallagher had woven. Witness after witness took the stand. One widow, her voice trembling, described the moment she realized her life savings were gone. "I thought I was secure for the rest of my life," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I trusted him because he prayed with me. He quoted the Bible and promised God would watch over my money. How could someone do this to us?" Gallagher's defense tried to paint him as a man of good intentions who had overextended himself, blaming poor business decisions for the missing funds. "I meant to help them," he told the court. "I borrowed from one account to help another, but I never intended to harm anyone." But the evidence was overwhelming. Emails, radio recordings, seminar brochures, and witness statements all contradicted his claims. He had knowingly misled clients, manipulated their faith, and orchestrated a scheme that lasted over a decade. The court listened as auditors explained how Gallagher had promised returns of 5% to 9% per year, a figure far above legitimate investments, and then siphoned new money to pay older investors, the textbook definition of a Ponzi scheme. The financial details were staggering. One couple had invested over $750,000 and received fake dividends for years, believing the payments were legitimate returns. Another retired couple lost nearly $600,000, funds that represented decades of careful saving. The total loss for all known victims was nearly $29 million, a sum that devastated families, forced relocations, and destroyed retirements. Investigators highlighted how Gallagher leveraged his status as a preacher, the trust embedded in his persona, to exploit the most vulnerable elderly individuals with little financial literacy, seeking safety and security in the promise of divine guidance. As the trial progressed, the court also examined Gallagher's modus operandi. He used small, consistent payments to create an illusion of reliability, encouraging clients to invest even more. He hosted seminars where free pastries and warm coffee masked discussions of complex financial instruments. He spoke in language his victims understood, blending biblical references with charts and figures, manipulating emotion and trust simultaneously. Each tactic was calculated. Each sermon, each seminar, each broadcast was another tool in the construction of a long-running financial deception. Beyond the courtroom, the community struggled to comprehend the betrayal. Gallagher's church had been a hub of faith and fellowship, and now it became a symbol of deceit. Local media recounted stories of families torn apart, friendships broken, and the psychological toll on those who had been swindled. One retired nurse explained she had considered taking out a reverse mortgage to survive, believing she could trust Gallagher to protect her savings. Another widow admitted she had moved in with her son, unable to maintain her home after her retirement funds disappeared. These personal accounts made the financial loss feel human, tangible, and heart-wrenching. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Gallagher maintained a public persona of righteousness. He smiled politely, adjusted his glasses, and occasionally offered a soft nod to sympathetic relatives in the courtroom. But each gesture was hollow. Investigators presented records showing that while victims' funds had disappeared, Gallagher had purchased multiple luxury vehicles, paid for high-end vacations, and funded personal indulgences with the very money he had promised to safeguard. His personal lifestyle, lavish and incongruous with the modest earnings of his victims, became a visual symbol of the betrayal. Sentencing day was heavy with tension. Victims returned to the courtroom, some supported by family, others by community members who had followed the case with horror. The judge read out the charges, the counts, and the evidence in deliberate, almost theatrical cadence. Gallagher's crimes included theft, money laundering, and securities fraud, and the sentences reflected the gravity of his offenses. He was given multiple concurrent life terms, along with restitution orders, though the total amount recovered represented only a fraction of what had been lost. The courtroom was filled with emotion as the judge concluded the proceedings. Families wept openly. Some hugged each other for comfort. Others silently contemplated the financial and emotional devastation they had endured. Gallagher remained stoic, escorted from the courtroom without comment. Outside, reporters captured the reactions of victims who spoke candidly about their experiences. Many described lingering feelings of mistrust, a sense that their faith had been weaponized against them, and the enduring psychological scars left by the decade-long fraud. Following the sentencing, investigators and receivers worked tirelessly to recover what remained of Gallagher's assets. Homes, vehicles, and company records were seized. Receivers attempted to redistribute remaining funds to victims, though the amounts were modest compared to the total losses. Community leaders began organizing workshops on financial literacy, emphasizing the importance of due diligence, skepticism, and the dangers of combining religious faith with investment decisions. Gallagher's case became a cautionary tale, cited in seminars and public discussions about elder fraud, Ponzi schemes, and the manipulation of trust. As the dust settled, the impact of Gallagher's crimes reverberated far beyond the courtroom. Victims faced ongoing challenges, rebuilding savings, managing stress, and coping with the betrayal. Churches that had once hosted his seminars instituted new oversight measures. Families reevaluated financial decisions, and the public, now aware of the depths of his deception, grappled with a complicated mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. Gallagher's story became more than a legal case. It became a symbol of vulnerability, exploitation, and the dark intersection of faith and greed. Yet even with all the convictions, the story was not over. Investigators continued to uncover smaller pockets of unreported victims, undisclosed transfers, and hidden accounts, revealing that the scale of the deception may have been even larger than initially understood. The complexity of the scheme demonstrated how meticulously Gallagher had planned every step, shoring that appearances of legitimacy masked an undercurrent of fraud. Each revelation deepened the sense of betrayal and confirmed the chilling reality. A man who had preached trust and faith had used those very virtues to line his own pockets. The lessons of this case extend beyond finance. They highlight the critical importance of scrutiny, independent verification, and the dangers of blind trust, even in those who appear most pious. The combination of charisma, religious authority, and financial acumen created a perfect storm for exploitation. The human cost, the shattered retirements, and the broken faith of his victims serve as a stark reminder of how trust can be weaponized when placed in the wrong hands. And if you thought this story was shocking, brace yourself, because the world of real-life scams is darker, stranger, and even more audacious than what you've just heard. There are fraudsters who operate on an even grander scale, and stories that will make Gallagher's audacity seem modest by comparison. Make sure you subscribe to Scamsphere so you never miss our next expose of deception, greed, and betrayal. If you were captivated by this preacher's story, the next con artist we reveal will leave you speechless, questioning everything you think you know about trust, faith, and money.